Any views or opinions expressed on KUR are not necessarily those of Kutztown University, Kutztown University Student Government, Kutztown University Student Services Incorporated, KUR staff and management, or other affiliated organizations.
I'm Stephen Maugeri, host of KU Live. Tune in every Tuesdays at 2 p.m. for all things Kutztown University. We will discuss everything ranging from school news, sports, and upcoming events, along with frequent appearances from student government to discuss new policies. We will also have members of ACE, the Association of Campus Events, to come in weekly to discuss what new activities are coming to the university. Tune in to 1670 AM or listen to us online at www.kutztown.edu/KUR or on your smartphone by downloading the TuneIn app. You can also listen to us via any phone by calling 610-465-7860. KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR Kutztown. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of KU Live. The time right now is 2:05 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Steve Maugeri, and we have another excellent show lined up for you guys today. We have Mr. Peter Weirs, a trustee for the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters, a politician from the Philadelphia area, is going to be speaking with us. And we also have, later in the show, we'll have WEEU in Reading, a talk show host and producer, Nick Lawrence, will be joining us. And we'll be talking about numerous number of issues. But right now, we'd like to get to our first guest over the phone from Philadelphia. Mr. Peter Weirs will be joining us. Mr. Weirs, you there?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs. How are you?
Very well, and it's an honor to be on the show.
It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, well, we'll just dive right into it. You are a member of you're a trustee for the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters. For our viewers, what is the trust and what is its purpose?
The trust is a financial relationship that a donor gave on behalf of all beneficiaries, and I, as the trustee, have to administer that benefit, that donation, for the benefit of all of the general public. The Roosevelt Bentman Trust is established to expressly secure and protect and defend the First Amendment rights of all voters within the political parties.
I see. So, yeah, the First Amendment is, of course, the most important amendment. And what infringements and what issues have you faced during your tenure working there involving the First Amendment?
Well, more specifically, it's the voters' First Amendment rights within the political parties. The trust is named after two Supreme Court decisions that expressly dealt with the voters' rights within the political parties. Application of Roosevelt, which was a 1956 New York Supreme Court opinion, and Benton v. 7th Democratic Ward, which is a 1966 Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision. And basically, both Supreme Court decisions held that because party representatives, people who you primarily know as committee people, are elected in elections at public expense by the voters, they're embedded and endued with the responsibility of representing people who elected them.
That sounds great. And as a trustee, what is your role? What is your duty as a member of the trust?
I have to administer the trust program. I the equivalent of maybe the CEO or general manager. I'm the one who runs this on a day-to-day basis.
That sounds like a great position for sure. And just to make sure if anyone's just tuning in, I'm interviewing Mr. Peter Weirs, a trustee for the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters, a politician from Philadelphia. And on the same topic of politics, we talked before, you said that you have a role in the upcoming governor race. What kind of role will you have in the upcoming election?
Well, basically, as the trustee, I provide the trust property. That's the donation made by the donor on behalf of all the voters. And this trust property enables the voters to communicate with the precinct committee people.
I see.
And allows the precinct committee people to communicate with the voters. One of the things in regard to your right of political association within the First Amendment is that you have a right to join a political party. And the reason why you join that political party is to give you the opportunity to actually effectuate that type of reform that you want within your political party, or in order to obviously win elections. You want to win elections for the purpose of being able to exert your view of government over that of somebody else. So that's what the trust property is going to be able to accommodate, is have the voters and the precinct committee people talk, particularly on election day, so that the precinct committee people can remind the voters, hey, we need to get you out to vote, and you haven't voted yet, please get out to vote.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. Voting is something that we should all believe in, because as citizens of this country, we need to, that's our right. And by not voting, we give more power to the people up top. So that's a great thing right there. And another thing we thought we'd mention, you've worn a lot of hats in your career. You've done a lot of great things. And one really amazing thing I saw, according to your website, is that you are the only person in recent history to successfully sue the Supreme Court of the United States and win. Just please elaborate. What was the issue?
Well, the issue was what I understand is a common occurrence in Washington. The Congress does not give the judiciary enough money for civil jury fee into the civil jury fee fund. And this is a recurring problem down there. And so I was looking to prepare the trial in this one particular year, 1993, and I noticed that there wasn't enough money in the jury fee fund to pay for potential jury. So I phoned the court administrator of the United States and said, what gives? And he says, well, Congress doesn't give us enough money. So he and I basically conspired for me to go file a petition for writ of mandamus, which he used to light a fire under a particular congressional appropriations subcommittee to get the funds moved and to get them replenished. And as a result, we all had the purposes won.
That's great, and that's an amazing accomplishment right there. And did this have anything to do with the Seventh Amendment? I think we might have talked about this. The
Seventh Amendment guarantees the right to a trial in a civil matter, and unlike the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, which primarily deals with criminal procedure, the Seventh Amendment deals with civil procedure.
Okay, well, great to know. And another thing I also wanted to talk about, this really pertains towards Kutztown as a whole, and something I really think our viewers should listen to on this. Just another update, I'm interviewing Mr. Peter J. Weirs, a trustee for the Roosevelt Benton Trust for American Voters. And he told me that Kutztown, this municipality, is the only municipality in the state of Pennsylvania that has open access network. Just so our viewers would know, what is it and how can it benefit us?
An open access network is a fiber optic network that is established by a municipality, which all carriers can then get on board and be transmitted to their eventual customers. It is different than a Verizon Fios network, for example. That's a privately constructed network which Verizon constructs and which Verizon will only allow itself to be transmitted over, and Comcast has a similar network. And the issues in regard to these privately owned networks is that, one, they're expensive to build, and there's an enormous capital investment in them, which they have to protect, and that the process of protecting their capital investment to construct these private communication networks doesn't facilitate the ability to expand that network and to keep up to date. An open access network, on the other hand, is paid for by the taxpayers and it's funded by subscribers that get on the open access network as well as the carriers, and it has a much greater flexibility and much greater ability to modernize itself and to keep up to date. Sure. It's basically the difference between a super lane highway that PennDOT constructs versus a private road that a property owner will construct. Obviously, if a property owner makes a driveway on his road, nobody else can use it. A highway that's constructed by PennDOT, everybody can use it.
Great, that's a great example. Yes, and you're very right, because our cable is all handled by an independent entity known as Service Electric, and that's Service Electric Cablevision, actually, and that does seem much more beneficial and economical for us. And another thing I thought we'd bring up, one of the many things you've done, you're a large proponent for the sport of wrestling, and you're a chairman for the PA Wrestling Club, the chairman. What's the reason behind your passion for the sport?
Well, basically, when I was introduced to wrestling in junior high school gym class, I discovered it was the only sport that I could sell in. When I was a kid, I was a fat, podgy kid who was always last picked for any type of team sport. And wrestling was something I can do. Unfortunately, I was suffering the onslaught of what we now know today as type 2 diabetes. And as a result, I never got to compete on the scholastic level or obviously on the collegiate level. And when you get to be my age, 59, there are certain things in life that you want to get accomplished before you move on. It's commonly called a bucket list. And this was one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to actually be able to step on a wrestling mat and compete. And this past April the 17th at the U.S. Open in Las Vegas, Nevada, I made international sports history by becoming the oldest person at age 59 to step on an Olympic-sanctioned wrestling mat for my very first competitive bout. Unfortunately, I drew the two-time reigning national champion. It was his 792nd bout. You obviously don't need a number 2 pencil to figure out which one of us won.
Oh, that's still amazing, though, just to get to wrestle like that. And that's, with a type 2 diabetic, that's amazing, and I applaud you for that. And you also had talked about how important people should realize about the sport of wrestling and how more states should allow it. And you talk about fight or flight. Just for our viewers, could you expand on that, what you mean by how wrestling pertains to that?
Well, wrestling is mankind's oldest knowledge sport. It's been with us antiquity and time. It is the only sport that is actually described in the Bible. We have illustrations of wrestling moves that date almost 1500 BC, both men and for women. And of all the sports that are out there, wrestling requires discipline, it requires dedication, and it basically it requires guts to be able to step up and go hand to hand, body to body combat against an opponent of your size and weight and gender and age. And it's just a character building sport that probably can't be equaled by any other sport out there.
Oh, I agree. And I have lots of friends in the wrestling team here that all would certainly agree with that. And there was one minor issue I just thought I'd bring up this question, that there was one story, and I think it was on that wrestling website you sent me, that there was an issue where a state playoff, I forget what state, a male wrestler in high school was supposed to wrestle a female wrestler and forfeited the match because he didn't want to wrestle a girl. What were your thoughts on that?
Believe it or not, my first sparring partner was Angela Quinn, who actually lives near Kutztown today. And, when you're on the mat, you're competing against an opponent, that opponent's, the intensity of the battle is so enormous, you don't stop and think about the person's gender or age or ethnicity or any other issue. You're just in the middle of a fight. The young lady who qualified for the Iowa State Championship, she worked hard to get there. She defeated opponents in order to get there, and she was qualified to compete in the Iowa State Championship. And most people inside the wrestling community believe that man should have stepped up to the mat and competed against her. The issue, as Professor Deborah Brake of the University of Pittsburgh Law School portrayed, is that the media mischaracterized the whole thing, and they portrayed it that he was engaged in an act of chivalry, and that he didn't want to engage in conduct that he thought appeared to be offensive to people. And all those arguments that the media portrayed were pretextual and didn't deal with the reality of the sport. All people are have this basic fight or flight syndrome or situation, as the doctors call it, the medical community calls it, and there would have been no issue had the young man actually competed against a young lady in the wrestling match.
Great point right there. It certainly sounds misconceptualized right there from the way that law school professor said it. And now just give an update to our viewers. I'm interviewing Mr. Peter J. Weers, a trustee for the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters, and we really appreciate you coming on the show. And we're also on to another amazing accomplishment you were able to do during your career. You were Pennsylvania's first candidate for public office and your first notary under the age of 21. How are you able to get your foot in the door like that so fast?
Yeah, that's basically because of the constitutional amendment. And I think it was the 25th Amendment. Don't hold me to that. But whichever was the constitutional amendment that changed the minimum voting age from 21 to 18, I had just turned 18 at that time. So that's how I took advantage of that.
Oh, I see. So there was a difference in the laws. But okay, that makes sense. Great to know that. And another thing you've done, you've published multiple books and have worked in the field of journalism as well. Of all the stuff we've talked about here, what do you believe is your proudest accomplishment in your career so far?
Oh, I don't stop to think about that. I'll allow people to allow the open writers to decide what was my most important accomplishment after I pass away.
Ah, I see. Well, there's certainly a lot more for you to accomplish for sure. Including one thing, I'll end on this, that right now, according to your website, many politicians, Republicans and Democrats, are seeking for you to run for Senate in Pennsylvania's 4th District. Do you see yourself running for Senate in the near future?
No, I don't. That opportunity came and went this past February. Various members of the Senate Republican caucus were urging me to run, but I would have to spend $250,000 in the Senate campaign, and I felt that I would be much better served by continuing my service as the trustee of the Roosevelt Bentman Trust, while simultaneously working on legislation that will most likely reappear next January in the Senate that helps address and resolve the issues of life by providing judicial remedies that have not yet been perfected by existing law.
Either way, I'm sure they would certainly miss you at the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters if you were to run for Senate. So it's great that you're remaining there. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Mr. Weers. We appreciate it.
And I thank you for having me.
We appreciate you taking your time. All right, well, thank you very, very much to Mr. Weers. That was Peter J. Weers, a trustee for the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters, and we really appreciate him coming on the show. And stay tuned for more KU Live.
It's Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us.
If you had to make a playlist that represented all of humanity, what would it sound like? Hi, I'm Michael O'Donohue, and I'm going to be talking about the Voyager and the Golden Record today. In 1972, humanity began one of its most optimistic and ambitious projects titled Voyager. 2 Voyager spacecraft were launched in order to explore the outer reaches of our solar system. They would beam back information in the form of data and pictures during the course of their flight. Voyager was imbued with a second purpose, though. In the off chance that these craft should ever be encountered by other life forms, objects were placed on Voyager to serve as inanimate ambassadors for humanity. Amongst these various objects, that included mathematical equations and a map to Earth, was a golden record. The record contained imagery of Earth and a carefully curated playlist of humanity. The creative director, Ann Drayan, and her husband, Carl Sagan, consulted many ethnomusicologists to select songs from throughout the history of humanity that would best represent the major nationalities of Earth. In addition to the music of Earth, a litany of sounds from around our planet were also recorded. So what will extraterrestrial life get to hear if they ever encounter Voyager and the Golden Record? Well, here's a small sample of the 30-plus selected sounds and songs. Bach. The sound of wind through the trees. Beethoven. A mother speaking to her newborn child. Ancient Chinese harp music. A greeting, repeated in 55 different languages. A train, roaring across tracks. A pod of whales. And my personal favorite of the list, Chuck Berry.
Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us. Stay tuned to KUR for more telescopic topics, and for more information or to hear the segment again, click on the Telescopic Topics icon on the KUR website at www.kutztown.edu/KUR. Telescopic Topics is a production of the KU Physical Sciences Department and is recorded by the KU astronomy students in the studios of KUR. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
It's hard for me to talk about, but I remember I was late for work and I was speeding. Then I saw the car and I hit the car, and at that point I just remember everything in slow motion, the car wrapping around me, and I kept thinking to myself, this is it, I'm going to die. Instead, I'm in the hospital. I'm going home tomorrow. But the hardest part with all of this is with Andy. He doesn't look me in the eye anymore. He just kind of pats me on the hand. He probably knows that I know that he's going to leave me, and I can see that in his face just as clearly as I can see what I've done to mine.
Speeding gets you nowhere fast. A public service message brought to you by this station and the U.S. Department of Transportation.
KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR, Kutztown. Hey everyone, welcome back to KU Live. The time right now is about 2:25 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Stephen Maugeri, and we're just coming back when we had a really informative, a killer interview by Mr. Peter J. Weirs, who is a trustee for the Roosevelt Bentman Trust for American Voters, which is a organization, a nonprofit organization that's centered around protecting people's First Amendment rights and also helping perpetuate the notion that people should vote. You know, it's your right to vote. And the man has worn a lot of hats in his career. He's been, he was a journalist. He's worked as a police officer, a firefighter. He's also the chairman of the Pennsylvania Wrestling Club. He has a role in the upcoming governor race, and he's one of the few people to sue the Supreme Court and win. Just a really great man to come on, and I'm sure he serves us, and that's always great to have someone of his integrity on our show, and I really appreciate that. But while we're here, I would like to just ask our viewers, if anyone who listened, what were your thoughts on it? What do you think of the thought of raising money for elections and how important is voting? He touched on a lot of subjects. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Call in at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. And the man is just very informative. He knows what he's talking about, and it's just amazing how he was able to sue the Supreme Court and win. It was concerning the Seventh Amendment, because he said in the interview that the government wasn't giving enough money to someone for a campaign, and that's something that he really focused on, is just saying, I'm going to defend my rights, and that's something that we all should be. We should be adamant and unyielding about that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. The number is 610-683-4859. 610-683-4859. We would love to hear from you. But for the meantime, I'd also like to invite my other guest who's going to be speaking as a co-host per se. We have the pleasure of getting our guest from WEEU in Reading. Nick Lawrence, a talk show host and also producer, is joining us today. Thank you for coming on the show, Nick.
Sure, Steve. It's good for me to be here. I'm excited about doing this with you. And as I was listening to your interview with Mr. Weirs, he mentioned the idea about the 26th Amendment that gave 18-year-olders the right to vote.
That's great.
I mean, it's pretty cool. So when you think about that there was a time when you wouldn't have been able to vote. I mean, you had to be 21 before you could vote.
If that wasn't in effect, I wouldn't have been able to vote for the last presidential election.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Right.
So I mean, that sounds like something that maybe our listeners would want to talk about. Can you imagine, or take the idea of the women's suffrage movement, the amendment that gave women the right to vote? Can you imagine any of the women on campus would not be able to vote even if they were 21 before this rule changed? And women were discredited, discounted in a sense, right?
Right. And he's there to... he's a proponent to help perpetuate the notion that people should vote, regardless of gender, race, and as long as you're within, 18 and older, and if you're registered.
Right.
And actually, last week on my show, I don't know if our viewers listened. We had Miss Leah Caselia of Student Involvement, which is starting a new action called Turbo Vote. So people with the stupid and useless excuse, the rationalization that I don't have time or it's too hard. Turbo Vote expedites the process. You can register to vote in the snap of your fingers, and it's just that much easier. And now they're moving. The only other issue is that they're saying, at the university, another issue that we should keep talking about is that right now they are moving the voting from, they used to have it on campus here for our students in the opaque field house, and now they're having it down at Maxitonia Township building, which is a few 3 to 5 miles down the road, and not every student has a car. Meaning that's almost, does that sound like voter suppression, making it more further away and more difficult to vote?
So it certainly sounds like it to me. I mean, voting should be as convenient as possible. I'm not even exactly sure, like when we do, why voting is always on that Tuesday in November. I mean, we should be able to vote pretty much anytime, or it should have voting on the weekends at times, right? So people can actually get to the polls. Because, I mean, a lot of people work. They can't get to the polls between 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning and 8 at night. And yet we limit that time for one of the most important rights that we have in the country to determine who's going to run the country for the next number of years.
Absolutely, and just that hits on Mr. Weir's what he does. He fights for our rights to vote, and it's a form of the First Amendment, of course. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts. Just anyone, please call in at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. What are your thoughts on the voting process? Do you think that it's too difficult? Do you think it's counterintuitive for them to say, we want everyone to vote, yet we, make it more difficult by, putting up these stupid barriers by saying you can't vote on weekends, only a certain amount of time during the day? I mean, one thing is it just doesn't make much sense. It's so contradictory that they would have voting hours during working hours.
It does. When you think about it that way, it's like banking hours. Many banks are open from 9 to 5. Well, who's able to go banking during that time when most people work? You'd think that this should be made as convenient as possible, and yet we make it as difficult as possible for people. If you can't get to the polls during that time, then basically you don't vote unless you're doing like an absentee ballot or something like that. But most people like to show up, they like to vote, and they like to get it done. But who can get there between 7 and 8, 7 in the morning, 8 at night, or 8 in the morning, 8 at night, whenever the polls open.
Either keep them open later at night or earlier in the morning. Yeah. And that's still not going to be easy for some people.
Steve, what do you think about young people voting? One of the things at the last election when President Obama was reelected, and his first time, a lot of young people turned out for that. And they used the social media, they used the internet and all this stuff to get kids to show up. Now there's some criticism that because it's a midterm election and there's no president running for office, that young people are not going to participate. What's your take on this thing? Maybe we can get the audience to give us a call. What are you guys thinking out there as to whether or not you will vote? You have the option and the right to vote, but will you vote? And does this midterm election mean anything to you? What do you think the feel on the campus is, Steve? You're here, so what?
I would love to hear what everyone thinks. Just one more time, the phone number, if you have any thoughts, 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. You have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And also, my thoughts on why students aren't voting. Is that what you'd like to know?
Yeah, I want to know whether or not you think kids are as interested in politics as they should be. The stereotype is that young people don't care, or you guys are just partying, you're just having a good time in life. In school, school's everything, and you don't care about anything else. I mean, I know that's a stereotype.
It is.
I want to know whether or not you think that's a legitimate stereotype, and are young people really interested in what's going on in politics for them?
I know. Well, just a disclaimer here, I don't speak for all young people of America.
But, of course not, but your opinion, though.
Yes, but from my own opinion, I believe that for some students, they're either not educated, they're indifferent about it, or some just, like you say, don't feel like doing the process. It's work. It's like we want everything done in this society. A lot of millennials like myself want everything done yesterday. And that's something that, is a lot of other people will agree with me. And with voting, I think that a lot of people voted for the presidential election because that's national news. You're going to find that anywhere if you want to find news about it. And this one's for the governor race, and it's and the reason that voting for this governor race is important. It's one of the few governor races I'm going to vote for now because I'm young. Mm-hmm. But this is very important because it has really, really big implications on the education system because of with Governor Corbett. Funding was cut, I believe, $1 billion.
$1 billion.
$1 billion was cut on education, overcrowding classroom. 20,000 teachers lost jobs in 3 years of that. And this isn't, I'm not using this as a forum for my diatribes. That's a fact. That's something that I have, I can attribute that. But it's something that, education is so important because it's the keystone. If you take away education, then we live in a credential society. That's just how it is. If you take away the education, that means that students can't get the education, which is, it creates barriers for them building their careers. And overcrowding classrooms turns nothing but, students into numbers and make, nothing. It's almost like teachers will start with too many students, overcrowded classrooms. Well, I feel like that would turn the education system into nothing more than an assembly line where you get them through here and send them to the next class, and it's jumping through hoops.
See, I'm wondering whether the audience thinks that the polarization in politics, either, we have today we have complete opposite sides. You have the liberals, and they're the exact opposite of the conservatives, and people feel that. The country is divided to some degree. I'm wondering if that polarization has filtered into the college campus, let's say here at Kutztown. So that's why we'd like you to give us a call if you're listening to this and you're interested in politics, or you're interested whether or not are you as motivated to vote? Are you turned off? Are you disenchanted by the whole political scene? Because we'd like to know. I mean, we have the right to vote, but people don't necessarily exercise it.
They don't, and if you don't exercise it right enough, it could be taken away. If you don't vote, it's quite simple. People saying that, and Mike and me have talked about this. It's my producer. We said that on the last show that if you don't vote, all your credibility and any of your position on any political issue goes out the door because you didn't vote to change it. You have no, you have no leg to stand on. And another thing is, and I said this with Mr. Weers, our previous guest, a trustee for the Bentman Trust for American Voters, was that if you don't vote, you're giving the people above, the power elite, more power than they already have and more than they need. And if that spreads throughout the country where less people vote, they may not even, for all we know, they may even think it's obsolete. We don't need to have a voting system because no one cares. And the fact that our generation, and a stat that I read in an atlas, a majority of the population is around under the middle, early mid-20s and 30s. All the children of the baby boomers are going through this era, and a lot of us are, not voting, and we're going to be adults, and unless we somehow develop an interest in politics, which we should, because that's our generation going into the future. We need to work as a people to change it. That's democracy 101. The people have the power to change everything, and we not voting is not. You're not going to solve a thing with that. So I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. Call in at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. What are your thoughts on voting? Is the system flawed? Do you feel that there's voter suppression, not just in Kutztown, but in other municipalities? You think the government just turns a straight eye towards municipalities that have smaller populations? Because that's one thing I think they may not be changed because they're thinking, oh, this is just a small town with only 4,000 full-time residents. Why put in all this effort just to change that? And that's something I would love to hear people's opinions, students, faculty, or any just viewers in the town at all. What are your thoughts? Because, some of the people that live in the town full-time also probably vote through this same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important for people to understand the power of the Congress, let's say, or even the Pennsylvania legislature. There's a limited number of people in Congress, a few hundred, we'll just say for one better term, right? And they control the lives of 320 million people. That's the population of the United States. And so when people decide that they're not going to vote, they're just giving up more control all the time. And so I think guys listening to the show, give us a call. Tell us what you think. Are you disenchanted? Give us a reason why you would vote. Give us a reason why you would not vote. What is the reason behind it? Is it just because you're complacent? Is it you don't care? Do you feel that your vote doesn't matter? Any of those things. 610-683-4859. 610-683-4859. Who's going to be the first one to talk to us today? That's what we'd like to know. Obviously, Steve, you and I could do this dialogue the entire show, but it would make it a whole lot more fun if some people would give us a call.
We want other people to talk to us about this. Candid discussion. We want to hear your thoughts. Why do you vote? Why don't you vote? We won't knock you for it. We respect your opinions, and we would love to hear from you. So just one other time for the number, 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. Because this topic is something that we talked about a lot, and we have a professor here who I'd love to bring on, and Mike, I'm sure we could try this at some point. We've talked about this. Professor Leonard Barish of the Electronic Media Department, a huge proponent for this. And also that I bring on, we have someone shadowing us, a student. We can get a talker right now. A member of KUR, hosts a music show, and student Matt Walsh, who's in the Electronic Media Department with me.
First, I would like to cut in real briefly. You're not going to believe the chances of this. By the way, this is Mike, your producer. They just sent out an email to the campus that the phone systems are down, and anybody trying to call in just gets a busy signal.
Well, there you go.
Wow, what
timing? But so just so you don't think that nobody's trying to call in, the phones are down.
Wow.
Second time in a week. I think we had a problem earlier this week,
too. There's a conspiracy going on.
Oh, they're trying to suppress
It's a conspiracy to bring Kutztown Live down.
They're prior restraint right now. They're trying to suppress us from even talking about it.
Hopefully they get it fixed before 3 o'clock.
Yeah, I hope. Yes, for sure. But, we have a student talker to talk right now, Matt Walsh. What are your thoughts on this? You know, you've heard the interview, you listened to our discussion. What are your thoughts on voting?
I kind of agree with what you have to say, that if somebody decides, I'm not going to vote, that they throw all the credibility out the window. But as my dad tells me from time and time again, if you don't vote, don't complain. I think what the problem is with people voting now is because there's so much polarization in the political parties. Like it's like a black or white issue. There's no like gray area anymore.
Yeah, it's that people become very cynical about it. One person said, I'm not going to mention names. He said, the reason he didn't vote was he was like, both of them are going to mess it up. I'm like, no, that shows me you didn't do your homework. And, and then you probably shouldn't then. If you shouldn't just, vote out of impulse. You got to find the right person. And to be honest, with political systems, this is just the way it is. There's never going to be a perfect system, all right?
No, there's not.
Utopia is never going to come to America. You're never always going to have someone that disagrees with it. But you have to find the silver lining. And with voting, I may not like both candidates, but I have to pick the one that I believe is the best for running.
It's like choosing the lesser of the two evils.
Exactly.
So there's a thought that today we can describe our government as an oligarchy, the rule by the few, right? In a sense, it is. Because if people don't vote, then they give that few, the people in Washington, the people in Harrisburg, the right to control us more and more because we're not having any say because we let the few decide our fates for ourselves, Steve.
Right. And, that leads to just, no one voting. That could spread. That leads to, rigid conformity, and that can lead to fascism. Authoritarianism. We don't want that coming back. That's a little, extreme, but I think
it's a little far-fetched to think like that.
Principally, you understand that it could end up as that, and that's the reason why we have this voting system. Other countries don't even have the right. They can't. They can't even say something. In some countries, if you say something that, I think in Iraq, if you said something that, Saddam Hussein didn't like, he'd cut out your tongue.
Or stone to death.
Yes, or something horrible and vitriolic like that. But here in this country, you have the right to vote and decide who runs your state or country. And this is something where for us students, especially in Pennsylvania, where we control, we lost, I'm not going to take sides on this, but in one that has huge implications on our education system that we're paying thousands of dollars to go to, and one the tuition is skyrocketed, I have to bring up. We need to vote and to do something about this because whether it's to stick with, if you believe in the system is working, that's your right. But if you believe in changing it and getting more funding for us, that'll help. Because first off, that's one thing that another issue, stipulation that may happen, is that if education continues to lose funding, tuition is going to skyrocket. And with education, knowing that it's becoming, it's sort of, I hate to say that, it's sort of turning into almost a business where, they have to make their money. They understand that. And they're not going to change it because they can't. They have to afford things, and that's going to lead to, with, overcrowded classrooms. We talked about this. I'm actually losing my train of thought. What was I going to say? I was talking about how the education system, is going to increase tuition. Here we go. And I just got it back. It increases tuition. That's going to lead to more loans. And there's a little thing trickling that isn't around as many people called compound interest, which can only lead to interest on your loans. I don't agree with it. I don't know why we have it. And, student loans can't be banished by any kind of bankruptcy, even Section 11 bankruptcy. You can't get rid of it.
Well, Steve, it's a travesty that in the United States of America, supposedly the richest country in the world, that our kids come out of school with huge debt. I mean, education, as you mentioned earlier, is the primary mover for all of us. The more we know, the greater chances we make better choices in life, whatever the choices we make. Education has now become so expensive, whether it's here like at a state university or any of the private schools. And so why do our kids get out of school with $50, $60, $70, $100,000 in debt? You have to pay that back someplace. You're just talking about
and it never goes away, ever.
Right. I mean, for people they're in their 30s and 40s still paying off college debt. Well, that's a travesty in itself. I mean, this country should have a greater appreciation for education. So it does matter what people we put into office because the decisions they make, like you mentioned about Governor Corbett cutting $1 billion out of the educational system, that changes a lot of things for people. So the value of voting is truly important because not just the big things matter, everything matters. And if you don't make that choice, you can see what's going to happen. We give the right to these politicians to make decisions for us without having our own voice.
For sure. And I'm sure Matt will agree with me on this. You have to, preach it. Show your voice, take your position, and be adamant about it. And it's a complete travesty because everyone says, "Oh, I want the American education." People come from other countries over here, yet it's become almost like a business. And I understand this is very important.
Like a very dirty business.
Somewhat, and the fact that I don't agree with that, we have to pay for something like textbooks. There are ways around that. In fact, I don't know if you guys heard about this, Jim. Well, this is just a separate issue. We'll go back to our original topic. I saw an article in the New York Times, if I could maybe look this up, about a school that has a library, because students always complain they have to spend a lot of money on textbooks, and the prices are a little inflated because of supply and demand and all that. But there is a school, I'm looking this up, so the school I heard about that has a library that is completely digital. So, let's see what this says here. A school that has a shift to digital. Okay, so, I can't find the exact school, but where all the textbooks are online, where students can get that. Yet, because of the fact that harkens back to my initial point, that because it's become a business, they're not going to change that. They're making their money, and as long as they can make more, the school, it's become nothing more than, we're almost consumer products. I hate to use that word. And 2 weeks ago, we had a professor from South Carolina State University who spoke about that and wrote a whole article in the Wall Street Journal about it. And if you want to look it up, it's called "We Pretend to Teach, They Pretend to Learn" by Dr. Jeffrey Collier of the Wall Street Journal. I recommend it. And the interview is also online if you look at the archives at KU Live. But it's
so Steve,
terrible.
that college university has this library, in a sense, everything online. Is that going to spell the downfall of libraries in the future? What do you guys think about that?
Excellent
Matt,
question.
what do you think about that? You think libraries will always survive since everything is electronic now? Will we always need these buildings where we house books, or will it be something that'll go away?
Well, I will say is that libraries, I think, will always be in existence, but the question or debate is, will they all be in hard of actual textbook form, or everything be all digital? But I think the problem is that younger generations have grown up in the digital age, and that's all they know. And what some educational systems don't take into account is that maybe there's people that go into colleges that are non-traditional age, and a good chunk of them may not know how to use computers. Mm-hmm. So that can create issues.
Right. Steve, what do you think? You think there's the future demise of the library, or as Matt says, maybe we'll have the library, but it won't be housing hard books anymore, but just computers for everything.
We hardly even use textbooks anymore.
Yeah, well, there's always, of course, monetary implications on that. The fact that if you take away libraries, then all of a sudden authors, they're losing money. Libraries lose money because now they have to, get all this technology and be ushered into a new era where a lot of a good number of the librarians probably don't know how to use all this stuff.
So
there's a reason why students are working at the library.
Yeah, excuse me. You just proved the point, because you went online to find something, right? 30 years ago, 25 years ago, you would have had to have gotten out of here, go to the library, get a book out, and check it out. Now you had instantaneous looking up information, right? So how is that going? What's it going to do for the future of do you guys like to touch physical books yet? I mean, do you like the idea of seeing a book, or is it just easier?
Is your producer allowed to jump in here?
Please do.
I just want to share a story that I love sharing with my students, because it's just hilarious on how the mindset has changed.
You always have interesting stories.
Yes. Well, thank you, Matt. A professor, a friend of mine, gave his class. He told me the story. He gave his class an assignment or a paper. I don't know what it was, but he gave this young lady a bad grade. And she stormed up to him after the class and just, released all kinds of, tirades and profanities, and said, "Do you realize that this took me a half hour to research this page?" And his mouth just fell agape. He's like, "Ma'am, what you just found in a half hour would have taken me back in the 1970s probably weeks or even more than that."
That is a great story for that. Thank you very much.
That's the mindset of some people. We're so used to this instantaneous, everything is right there.
Everyone wants everything done yesterday. And, it does somewhat, it's somewhat, I believe that due to that, pride in people's work becomes supplanted by expediency. People just want to, get them done, and it's all about doing what's easy instead of what's right. It has made it easier. And I know there's another book out there that I wrote about. It's called The Dumbest Generation. It's my thought, just my thoughts. These don't reflect the reviews of the university. It's hogwash. It generalizes. It's got fallacies throughout it about how people are all illiterate and only want to find use the internet for everything. When the good thing is there's in some of my classes, and Matt, what I'm talking about, in a lot of EM classes, the textbook is your best friend in a lot of the classes.
Yeah, especially in Professor Barish's
I was
class.
about to say that. I can't look up any of the technology, the terms in there. The textbook you need to read, and I think it should be enforced a little more. I have had classes where the professor has the textbook, and it doesn't even, we don't even open it. She puts everything from the chapter on the slides the next day. And reading is something that we all should do. Believe me, I understand it. It's something that requires undivided attention and, processing. You're really giving your brain a workout. But if you read something, it's been proven. That's how you learn,
So, Steve, you and Matt made a good point now. Okay, so you have a professor who says you have to have this textbook for this particular class, and then you never open the textbook. Yet you might have spent $100 for that.
Exactly.
But
you get nothing back.
And you
very
can't
little
get
back.
and so that's an injustice. There's something wrong with that. So if they're going to use it, if they're going to tell you need a textbook, they better use the textbook. If they're not going to use the textbook, then you shouldn't have to buy it, regardless of what the curriculum says.
Right. It's another thing. The reason the school wants, and this is not taking a bash. Other schools do this too. A lot of schools, understand that that's how they make money, and
they're going paperless.
If students are not reading, then they're going to be selling them back and getting all their money back. Then they're not making any profit out of it. But I understand textbooks are something we will always need. I don't want to an extent, I'd want a digital era would be very helpful, but there's still going to be classes where you have to sit down and read, and that's what's one way to expel any laziness in students, because some students understand. I understand we're busy. We have a lot of stuff thrown at us, and it's hard to juggle at times. And when students read something for a class, I will hold this contention that reading something once does not always help. I have friends that are just really smart, like they can read something once and they get it, but not a lot of students are like that. You need to read something more than once, and that just requires more time. And students think that finding a tighter version of it written on the internet, it saves you time and you're able to understand the material. So there are ways to help. There's a way to balance it. And
one of the roles that I have on WEEU is that I interview teenagers every week. They're kids from 9th through 12th grade, and we always talk about this idea of what college is going to mean to them when they're seniors. And Matt was one of my former students.
Yeah,
and
small world.
Right,
it goes back a long ways.
It does go back, Matt, but it was good though. But when you think about it, is college? This is from, I know they ask these kinds of questions of me. Is college glorified high school, or is it bigger and is it harder than college? Can you get through? Can you get through college without cracking a book?
Yeah. Is it 13? It's not 13th through 16th grade. That's for sure. But
yeah, that's what I'm asking. You guys are in this world, and our listeners primarily are college students. So what do you think they would say about that?
Matt, you go first.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that when I went off to college, I thought I started off at Reading Area Community College. I thought it was going to be just like 13th and 14th grade, but I was dead wrong about that. And even when I came here, I thought it was just going to be a continuation of high school. But once I stepped into Professor Barish's classroom, I sure got a dose of reality.
Well, that's a good thing. That's why Professor Barish, I'm a huge fan of his style, because he's
very old school.
And that helps sometimes, because the good thing about that is I call those classes boot camp, because it weeds out people that aren't motivated. Because in this industry, there's a lot of stuff you have to know.
Yeah.
Not just like, you can't jump through hoops or press buttons.
Yeah.
You can't find the strike zone. You need to know what works, because there's a comprehensive exam where you utilize these skills. And that's why that class,
audio production.
Yeah, audio production. And it's where we learn how to use this exact stuff right here.
Yeah.
And there are other professors like that too. And it's a great method. You need to know how to speak the language of your major.
Yes.
And there's another thing I'll bring up. Another thing that, it's not just that. College is not vocational. There are skills you are going to need to know that transcend way beyond your major. Mm-hmm. I take, electronic media taught me a lot, but there's other stuff I got to know. I learned how to write, journalism classes. Dr. Downing in the English department, I wish he was listening, he's been so helpful for me. And health classes teach me about health, finance classes, critical thinking, other skills you're going to need. Because once you enter the real world, college
There's
gives
no
you
safety net anymore.
Yeah, the college gives you the requisite skills to do that. I'll always say that. And there are classes that, will teach you that. And you need to learn to apply them. If someone were to just, and then I'll let you guys talk, if someone were to just, ease their way through a finance class and be real perfunctory with their work, and all of a sudden they have to learn how to budget their money, they're in trouble, because the world is the real world for people just getting out of college can be very cruel.
So, Steve, I was thinking, since people can't call us because the phone system's out,
I wish we could.
Is there a chance that you give out your email address? They can email you a comment about the show today if they wanted to do that. That way, you'll know whether somebody was able to comment, even though they couldn't call in.
Right. I could.
Why don't you do that?
And I would suggest, being that the campus student email addresses are so obnoxious with letters and numbers and live and Kutztown and whatever, that you simply just give out the KUR@kutztown.edu, and I'll forward anything to you.
That would be great.
That'd be great. Email my producer. Okay, so that's KUR@kutztown.edu. KUR@kutztown.edu. Capital or lowercase?
I don't think it matters, but usually just lowercase.
Hey, you got a 50-50 chance of getting
there
it.
There you
go. So that's great. We would love to hear discussions. I'm sorry, Mike, I should know this. We have a Facebook page for the show?
Not for the show. You're welcome to make one for your show. That's one thing I encourage all my students to do. We haven't really talked about that, but there is a Facebook page for the station, of course.
That is something
which we're very active on, and actually won an award for last year.
We did. So we need to continue that. We won Best Use of Social Media. Time to show it. We need to. Okay, so we need to make a Facebook page for the show, because that's a great what do you call it? A forum for discussion. People can just ask questions, and I can answer them on the air. It shows that we're listening, and people want. It gives more talking points for us. We love to hear from you.
And it gives people who are not comfortable literally calling in a way to communicate their ideas. There are people who will be listening to the show today who, even if we had the phones working, wouldn't call, but they have feelings about this thing, and they might be more comfortable writing to you or writing an email or doing a Facebook than they would doing talking. So we open the window for everybody who's listening then to get in touch with you, Steve.
Right, and I know that there should be a way. I should know this. I'm a millennial myself. There should be a way. Is there a way for someone to, request to be anonymous, and so that just it's a comment instead of a actual instead of putting their name out there, so they can ask you,
email? Are you talking about?
Not email. Facebook. There is a new account called Yik Yak, which it's Twitter, except you're random. You're not a name. You're just a tweet. Except that's not really much something we can monitor. But if someone wants to call in, you don't have to when we get the phone lines back. If you call in, you don't have to give your name. You can just ask what's your name. You say I request to not give out my name, and that's fine. We would just, as long as we can hear, we want to hear your thoughts, and that's something I really want to work on for the next week, and also just to let our viewers know that Mr. Nick Lawrence, we are pleased to have Nick Lawrence from WEEU in Reading to come join me and help share some of his expertise, because he will be joining us twice a month for the rest of the semester. So expect he'll be on the show frequently.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. And also thank you to the input from Matt. Matt's getting used to talk radio.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me on today. I'll be back.
I'm sure you will. And that's what we like to have. Last semester, that was my indoctrination into radio. I learned about how, I just used my interviewing skills. I wanted to make it, more interactive and engaging by having, student, not just students, but, public figures in the university, whether it's professors, school president. Of course, I love to have the athletes on there. I love my days hosting Between the Lines. I love talking. I love covering the sports here. That's something that we really need to, I love having those people on, because this is not as prominent of a school as you see as maybe a Penn State or something, but this community is still where people love it. They live here, and this is where they work and spend a majority of their time in their life. And there's always stuff going on. This may be a town in the middle of Pennsylvania, but there's still a lot of pressing issues going on that we like to talk about, and that can apply to just this university or as a university to all colleges. So that's a very great thing that we talked about. Another thing, I'd like to thought we'd talk about is just to give a recap of the show for those who are tuning in. We had Mr. Peter J. Weirs, a trustee for the Bentman Trust for American Voters. He's a politician in Philadelphia who's done a lot. And if you missed the interview, it will be broadcast on the podcast. What time, Mike? At I believe you say 4 hours?
Well, I never guarantee an exact time. I usually like to say within a day it'll be up on our website.
I'll never hold you to a time constraint. Yes, and it's a big file. But yes, it'll always be up on YouTube, and we can always put out a link to that. And we would love for you, if you want to learn more about what this man's done. He's just one thing as my pitch. The man is the first person in recent history to successfully sue the Supreme Court of the United States about regarding the Seventh Amendment, and that's something that it's an amazing accomplishment. And the man also just another fun part. He is He wrestles. He's 59 years old, and he's a type 2 diabetic, and he made sports history when at the age of 59 he became the oldest person ever to step onto a sanctioned wrestling mat. So that was a very great guest on there. And hey, if issues arise again surrounding, voting, I'd love to have Mr. Weirs back on again. But if he's listening, thank you very much for coming on the show, Mr. Weirs. And thank you to Nick Lawrence. Thank you to Matt Walsh. And, very interactive show today, and we hope to continue that next week. So I'm Stephen Maugeri, and thank you for listening to KU Live. Have a nice day.